Welcome to Drift Off to History, where we bring calm stories for curious minds. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always comforting to imagine all of us, scattered across the globe, quietly unwinding together. Tonight, we begin a journey beneath the stars and through the swirling mists of ancient time. And in this gentle hour ahead, we'll explore the many layers of mystery that surround one of the world's most iconic and ancient monuments, Stonehenge, a circle of great standing stones rising from the windswept Salisbury Plain in southern England. For thousands of years, they have stood in silence, watching the skies, holding secrets, and stirring the imagination of everyone who walks among them. Why were they built? Who raised them? How were such massive stones moved? And what meaning did they hold for those who came before us? As we begin, let your thoughts slow. Let your breathing deepen. Let the images form gently behind your closed eyes. The endless plain, the golden grasses moving in the breeze, the faint rustle of the past brushing against the present. The air is cool here. The stones are old, and they are waiting. Stonehenge is more than a place. It is a mirror, a riddle carved in stone. And for the next hour, we will sit beside it, quietly, curiously, listening for the story it still longs to tell. So settle in, let the world fade for a while, and together, let's drift off to history. There is a stillness that lives on the Salisbury Plain, a kind of silence older than language, older than memory. It settles into the land like low morning mist, curling around gentle hills, brushing through tall grasses, and whispering through the ancient stones that stand, weathered and watchful, beneath the wide English sky. As you approach this place, you may not see the stones right away. The plain stretches out in quiet waves, a vast open patchwork of chalk and heath, dotted with wildflowers and birdsong. The wind is the first to greet you, rolling across the open landscape in long, soft breaths. There is no city here, no noise, no hurry, just the hush of earth and sky, and the faint cry of a crow carried from somewhere far away. And then, slowly, as you rise with the land, they appear, Stonehenge, a silent ring of great standing stones, rising from the earth as if born from it. Some lie fallen, half buried in the soil. Others stand tall, proud and unmoving, as though frozen in mid-thought. Grey, solemn and massive, they hum with the weight of centuries. Each one seems to whisper its own quiet story, though none speak above the wind. And yet, their presence is undeniable, still, commanding and impossibly old. They hold time in a different way than clocks or calendars. Here, time pulls rather than flows. You're not standing in just one century, but in all of them at once. Past, present, and future meet in the circle's shadow, where the ticking of minutes is replaced by the breath of the land. It's easy to understand why ancient people chose this spot. The sky here feels larger, more intimate somehow, as if the heavens themselves bow slightly toward the earth. The light is crisp, the horizon open, the air thick with meaning. At solstices, the rising and setting sun aligns precisely with the stones, casting long shadows that echo patterns carved into the earth. Even on ordinary days, the monument seems to interact with the light, as though it's still listening to the stars. The land feels sacred, but not in any way that needs explaining. It simply is, calm, timeless, holding something just beyond our reach. What dreams gave rise to these stones? Who first imagined their shape, their weight, their placement in the soil? What did they see in their minds? A calendar, a temple, a place of passage or healing? There are many theories, and none are certain. But perhaps that is the very heart of its charm. a mystery worn smooth by time, still refusing to be solved. The closer you get, the more questions arise. The rough surface of the stone invites your fingers, but tells you nothing. The shape of the circle suggests intention, yet its meaning remains just out of reach. You may notice the outer ring first. Towering sarsen stones, many over 20 tons, some capped with horizontal lintels to form great archways. Inside lies a smaller horseshoe of blue stones, carried from the distant hills of Wales, their darker hue glinting faintly in the light. And in the centre, the altar stone, long and flat, like a quiet stage or table laid bare for the sky. Around them all runs a deep ditch and embankment, the original henge that gives Stonehenge its name. The entire structure feels layered, deliberate, and deeply symbolic, though we can only guess at the meaning behind each choice. The truth is that Stonehenge was not built in a single moment. It is the work of generations, perhaps even different cultures and visions laid atop one another like rings in a tree. The earliest post holes date back over 5,000 years, before the stones ever stood upright. Then came wooden structures, then smaller stones, and finally the immense trilithons that give the site its iconic silhouette. To walk among them is to walk through time itself, not as a straight path, but as a spiral, always returning to the same questions, the same sense of wonder. As you breathe in the cool air and feel the wind brushing your skin, a curious peace settles in. You're standing in a place where thousands once gathered, not to rush or to conquer, but to mark time, to celebrate the turning of the seasons, to commune with something beyond themselves. Can you feel it too? That sense of stillness, of deep presence. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the past unfurls. Perhaps there were drums once, echoing across the plain, fires flickering, voices raised in ceremony or song, in a language long since lost. You imagine the light of torches moving through the dusk, casting long shadows between the stones. Then, as the wind quiets again, so do those visions. The moment fades, the stones remain. Stonehenge does not offer answers, it offers presence, a space for stillness, for awe, for wondering without needing to know. It is not just a monument to the past, it is a mirror for the soul, polished not by hands but by time. And as we begin this gentle journey into its story, we do so not with certainty, but with calm curiosity, with open hearts and slow breaths. We are here now, beside the stones, wrapped in the soft wind of a timeless plain, and the story has only just begun. Long before the first stones were raised, long before the circle took shape against the sky, there were people on this land. They were farmers and foragers, herders and craft workers, quiet stewards of the earth who lived close to the rhythm of the seasons. Around 3000 BCE, these Neolithic communities roamed the rolling hills and river valleys of what we now call southern England. Their homes were made of wood and thatch, their tools shaped from bone, flint, and stone, their days guided by the stars and the soil beneath their feet. The world they knew was simpler in some ways, yet richer in others. There were no machines to shape their landscape, only strength, patience, and an intimate knowledge of nature. Their calendars were the movements of the moon, the length of a shadow, the changing songs of birds. They followed the slow spiral of the year, marking solstices and equinoxes, not with clocks, but with firelight and feast. The earth was not a resource, it was a companion. And it was from this quiet reverence that the first steps towards Stonehenge began. At first, it was not stone they worked with, but wood. Long before the massive monoliths we see today, the builders of this land dug deep post holes into the chalky ground, erecting timber circles, pathways, and perhaps even ceremonial avenues. These wooden constructions have long since vanished, returning to the earth from which they came, but traces remain in the soil, ghost rings beneath the grass, faint impressions of intention and design. To shape a monument on such a scale required more than just physical effort. It needed vision, collaboration, perhaps even devotion. It's likely that many generations were involved, parents and children, neighbours and wanderers, all contributing in ways small and great to a cause larger than any one lifetime. There were planners, designers, spiritual leaders. There were stonecutters, haulers, builders, and those who simply passed water, food, or encouragement to the workers as they toiled under the sun. It was, in every sense, a community undertaking, and yet, how did they do it? The stones used in Stonehenge, particularly the sarsens, the largest of the lot, weigh upwards of 20 tons each. Some may have come from as far as 25 kilometres away. Others, like the smaller bluestones, travelled over 200 kilometres from the Preseli Hills of Western Wales. These people had no wheels, no beasts of burden, no cranes or engines, just ropes, rollers, muscle, and time. Modern theories suggest they used wooden sledges and stone balls rolled over grooved planks, or logs placed like tracks beneath the weighty cargo. Rivers may have offered floating passage for some of the journey, while others were dragged painstakingly across land. It's thought that hundreds of people would have been required to move even a single stone, coordinating in rhythm, chanting perhaps, singing to keep time and courage alive. One can imagine the sound of it, low grunts, the creak of timber, the steady beat of feet on soft earth, the encouragement of voices rising over hills. It was a triumph not only of engineering, but of belief. To invest such enormous effort into something that yielded no immediate survival advantage, no crops, no weapons, no shelter, tells us that these people were guided by something profound. Whether it was spiritual awe, ancestral duty, or celestial curiosity, they saw beyond the day-to-day and worked towards something greater, more enduring. We must not mistake their simplicity for ignorance. Though their tools were primitive by modern standards, the people who built Stonehenge understood geometry, astronomy, and the weight and balance of stone. They observed the skies with precision, tracking the sun's position with astonishing accuracy. They studied the land, aligning their monument not only with celestial events, but also with nearby sacred sites. Stonehenge was not alone in its sacred purpose. It was part of a wider landscape of ritual and meaning. Nearby, at Durrington Walls and Woodhenge, vast timber circles and settlements were constructed, echoing the shape and symbolism of the stones. The River Avon meandered through it all like a silver thread, linking life to death, earth to sky, present to past. And what of their lives, these builders of stone? They lived in roundhouses, with walls made of wattle and daub and roofs thick with thatch. Inside, the hearth was the centre of the home, a place for warmth, for stories, for meals cooked slowly and shared communally. They wore clothing woven from wool, dyed with plants, and fastened with simple bone pins. Their days were filled with the tasks of survival, grinding grain, tending animals, shaping tools, weaving baskets. But they also carved patterns into stone, buried their dead with care, and gathered in great numbers to celebrate the turnings of the year. We know from remains found in nearby burial mounds that these people were not always young or strong. Some suffered from arthritis, others from injuries or chronic illness, and yet they worked together to build something vast and enduring. Perhaps it was precisely this fragility, this awareness of life's brevity, that inspired them to leave behind something lasting. It is humbling to imagine, to stand where they once stood, to run your hand along a stone they once placed. The ground beneath your feet still holds traces of their footsteps, pressed faintly into the chalk long ago. The wind that brushes your cheek once stirred the cloaks they wore. And as you look out across the plain, you may find yourself wondering, not just how they built this place, but why? Was it for the dead, for the gods, for the sun? Or was it, perhaps, for the people themselves, a place to gather, to remember, to feel part of something greater than one's own story? A place where time stood still, and the universe felt close enough to touch. We may never know for certain. But as we walk with soft steps through their world, we begin to hear the echoes, quiet and deep, of those who lived and laboured here. They left no written words, no monuments to kings or wars, but they left this, a circle of stone, a song of earth and sky, frozen in time. So let us pause, just for a moment, let the wind carry us back to that distant world, where hands calloused by labour shape the sacred from the raw. Let us honour the quiet brilliance of those who came before, not with fanfare, but with stillness. For in this silence we can almost hear them. The builders are long gone, but their story is not. It lives in the stone, it lives in the earth, and now, for a little while, it lives in us. There is a kind of magic that lives in the night sky, a slow celestial rhythm that has danced overhead for as long as the earth has turned. For the ancient people who once walked the Salisbury Plain, the sky was not empty. It was alive. It was filled with meaning. The stars marked the seasons. The sun guided the harvest. The moon spoke to tides and time. And above the quiet plain, Stonehenge rose, not just as a monument to the earth, but as a mirror to the heavens. Even today, if you visit the site at dawn on the summer solstice, you will see the sun rise directly through the heart of the stone circle, casting a golden beam along the avenue, as though the light itself were slipping through a secret door. At winter solstice, it sets in perfect alignment with the opposite side of the monument, dipping below the horizon between two towering uprights. These are not coincidences, they are signatures, carefully chosen alignments that suggest Stonehenge was more than sacred ground. It was also a kind of observatory, a place where sky and stone spoke in harmony. Imagine, for a moment, a world without streetlights or screens, a sky unclouded by modern glow. At night, the stars would have shimmered like frost on black velvet, bright, immediate, and infinitely mysterious. The movements of celestial bodies would have been familiar companions, their slow arcs tracked by careful eyes and thoughtful minds. Stonehenge, in this context, was a tool, a temple, yes, but also a calendar, a way of reading time by the shifting light, a stage upon which the drama of the cosmos unfolded. The great trilithons at the centre of the monument, two vertical stones supporting a horizontal lintel, form a kind of frame. Some scholars believe they may have been positioned to mark not only solstices, but also lunar cycles, eclipses, and other astronomical events. The heel stone, standing just outside the main circle, may have served as a marker for midsummer sunrise. The station stones, placed in a rectangle around the circle, may relate to complex lunar calculations, and throughout the structure, subtle differences in size, placement, and angle suggest a deep understanding of both geometry and the skies above. But how did they know? It is a question that humbles us. These were people without telescopes or satellites, yet they built a monument that aligns with the stars in ways that continue to astonish modern scientists. Perhaps the answer lies not in tools, but in time, in patience, in careful observation passed down across generations. A young child watching the sunrise year after year, an elder marking shadows as they shift across the ground, stories told by firelight, knowledge carried in memory, in ritual, in quiet practice. When the rhythms of nature are all you know, you begin to hear them clearly, and perhaps that clarity was enough. Of course, not everyone agrees on the astronomical significance of the site. Some argue the alignments are over-interpreted, that Stonehenge was more symbolic than scientific. Others suggest it was never meant to function as a calendar, but simply to connect those on Earth to the vast, ungraspable sky. But even in this uncertainty, there is beauty, because Stonehenge doesn't shout its purpose. It invites us to wonder. The stars above are the same ones those ancient builders saw. Orion still marches through the winter sky. The Pleiades still shimmer in a tight glowing cluster. The moon still swells and shrinks in its silver dance. And the sun still returns, year after year, to cast its longest and shortest shadows across the same quiet ground. We are not so far removed from them, these sky watchers of stone. We too look upward and ask the same questions. Where did we come from? What lies beyond? How does it all fit together? There is something deeply calming in the idea that Stonehenge may have been built to hold these questions, to give shape to the unshaped, to anchor the immensity of the cosmos to something tangible. Perhaps the stones were not answers, but companions to the mystery, markers that allowed people to witness the turning of the year, to gather in times of darkness and light, to honour the passage of time not with fear, but with ceremony. It is easy to picture them there, dressed in furs and woven cloth, faces lifted toward the dawn. Perhaps they sang as the light broke through the stones. Perhaps they wept, or simply stood in silence, allowing the sun to brush against skin and stone alike. The moment when sky meets earth, when the heavens acknowledge the circle below, must have felt sacred, powerful, and strangely reassuring. Today, thousands still gather to watch the solstice light spill through the ancient ring. Some come in celebration, others in quiet reflection. Many do not know precisely why they are drawn here, only that something stirs in them when the first light of midsummer threads its way between the stones. A memory perhaps, not of the mind, but of something older, something carried in our bones. Stonehenge reminds us that we have always looked upward, that the night sky has always been our map, our mystery, our muse, and that even now, when we feel small or uncertain, we can return to this circle of stone and remember that we are part of something vast and beautiful, a pattern that began long before us and will continue long after. Let us pause now under that ancient sky. Let us feel the pull of the stars, the slow, patient turning of the world. Let us imagine the builders long ago, watching the same constellations drift by, placing stones not just to honor the sun, but to feel closer to something eternal. And as the night deepens and the stars take their places, the stones stand quietly still, watching, waiting, whispering, perhaps, to those who still care to listen. There is something about Stonehenge that feels sacred, not in the way of grand cathedrals or gilded temples, but in a quieter, more elemental way. It is a place where the veil between worlds seems thin, where time and memory echo in the very soil. And though the circle may appear cold and silent, it was once alive with footsteps, with voices, with rituals played out beneath the sky. It was not merely a structure to look at, it was a place to be in, a space for ceremony, for reverence, for connection. Long before the stones were raised, the land around Stonehenge was already being shaped by human hands. Beneath the surface, archaeologists have discovered evidence of cremation burials, the earliest dating back over 5,000 years. The remains of men, women and children were carefully placed within the circular ditch, suggesting that the site may have begun not as a monument to the living, but as a sanctuary for the dead. Ash and bone, carefully interred, hint at a community deeply connected to the cycles of life and loss. The cremations were not random. They were positioned with care, often aligned with the sun or with other features of the landscape. In this, we begin to see the foundations of belief, a world in which death was not an end, but a passage, a return to the earth, to the ancestors, to something greater than the individual life. The circle, already taking shape in the minds of those who walk this ground, may have symbolized not only the turning of the year, but the turning of the soul, from this world to the next. As time passed, the rituals grew. With the addition of the blue stones and later the Sarsens, Stonehenge evolved into a space not just for the dead, but for the living to gather and bear witness. Processions may have moved along the avenue, a ceremonial route stretching from the river Avon to the stones, perhaps mimicking a journey from water, symbol of life, to the circle of ancestors. Fires would have flickered, drums may have sounded their slow, heartbeat rhythm. Words lost to time may have been spoken in praise, in farewell, or in hope. Nearby, the site of Durrington Walls offers glimpses into the living side of this ceremonial world. There, evidence of feasting and large temporary dwellings suggests seasonal gatherings, possibly linked to the construction or celebration of Stonehenge. Massive quantities of animal bones have been found. Pigs roasted whole, bones split for marrow, the remains of communal meals shared under open skies. It is easy to picture the scene. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people gathered in the cold of midwinter or the brightness of midsummer, marking the turning point of the year with food, fire, and ritual. Were these events somber or joyous, quiet or ecstatic? We cannot know for certain, but the scale of the effort, to move stones, to feed multitudes, to align everything with the heavens, suggests a deep and enduring belief in the importance of these moments. Whether honoring the dead, asking for blessings, or simply reaffirming a sense of shared identity, the people who gathered here did so with purpose, and that purpose has left its trace in the ground, in the stones, in the silence that still hums through the air. Among the most intriguing clues are the burials discovered nearby. Not only cremations, but also inhumations in long barrows and circular mounds known as round barrows. Many contain individuals buried with care and intention. Flint tools, bone pins, beads, and in some cases, items that must have held deep meaning, objects placed not for use, but for memory. One such individual, known as the Amesbury Archer, was found just a few miles from Stonehenge. Buried with over 100 grave goods, including copper knives and gold ornaments, he appears to have come from Central Europe, a reminder that even in ancient times, people and ideas travelled far. Perhaps he came to Stonehenge as a pilgrim. Perhaps he was a leader, a healer, or a priest. Or perhaps he was simply someone whose story touched others deeply enough to warrant such an honourable rest. Whatever his role, he reminds us that this place drew people not only from nearby villages, but from across great distances, that Stonehenge was a beacon, a destination, a spiritual heart in a wider world. It is possible that the stones themselves held symbolic power, The bluestones in particular may have been associated with healing. Their long journey from the Preseli Hills of Wales adds weight to this idea. Why else transport them such a great distance, unless they held special significance? Some archaeologists suggest that people came to Stonehenge not just to mourn the dead, but to seek restoration for the living. Perhaps the circle served both, a bridge between life and death, health and illness, past and future. There is also evidence that certain stones may have been deliberately placed to create acoustics, to reflect sound, to amplify the voice, to create resonance during chants or song. In this way, the rituals would not only have been seen, but felt and heard. Imagine the sound of low chanting as the sun set beyond the horizon, the echo of a drumbeat, the cry of a voice lifted in the center of the circle, caught by the stone and carried outward into the night. Rituals are by nature layered with meaning, some practical, some spiritual, some emotional, and so it likely was here. Stonehenge was a place where people came to make sense of the things they could not control. The turning of the seasons, the arrival of illness, the mystery of death. It was a place of gathering, of letting go, of coming together to face the vastness of time. And that is, perhaps, what we still feel when we visit today. Not just awe at the scale or mystery of the stones, but a quiet connection to something deeply human, a need to mark the important moments, to come together, to remember, to believe. As we leave this chapter, let us picture them, the builders and the dreamers, the mourners and the celebrants, gathered in the circle of stones, firelight dancing across their faces. Let us honor the sacred hush that lives here still, and let us carry that silence with us as we move deeper into the mystery. When reason fades and the mist rolls in, something stirs in the imagination. It is in these soft and shadowed places that myths are born, not from facts, but from feelings. For thousands of years, long after the last stone was raised and the original builders had vanished into memory, Stonehenge remained, unmoving, unexplained, a puzzle in the open air, and where there is a mystery, stories soon follow. The ancient Britons who wandered past the stones had no written records of their origin. To them, the towering shapes may have seemed impossibly old, the work of beings far greater than themselves. It is no wonder then that one of the earliest tales speaks not of people, but of giants. In the medieval manuscript known as the Historia Regum Britanniae, written by Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 12th century, we are told that Stonehenge was once a circle of magical stones called the Giant's Dance, a monument brought from Africa to Ireland by giants, and later moved to England by none other than the wizard Merlin. In Geoffrey's tale, Merlin is tasked with creating a memorial to fallen British nobles. Instead of designing a new monument, he suggests retrieving the ancient giant's dance from Ireland, stones said to possess powerful healing properties. With a clever spell, Merlin dismantles the circle, transports it across the sea, and reassembles it on Salisbury Plain. Thus, according to the story, Stonehenge came to be not through sweat and stonecraft, but through magic, mystery, and the will of a wizard. Of course, the story is not true in the historical sense, but that has never been the point of myths. Myths speak not to what happened, but to what we need to believe. About the past, about ourselves, about the world. They offer meaning where meaning has been lost. They fill in the silence with wonder. And Stonehenge invites that wonder. Its very presence demands a story. What could have lifted such heavy stones and arranged them so precisely? Surely not ordinary people. Surely not without aid. the leap to magic is not so far when faced with something that seems to defy human limits. And so, over the centuries, the legends deepened. In some versions, the stones were dancers, turned to rock for defying the Sabbath. In others, they were healing stones carried from a holy mountain, infused with ancient power. One tale tells of the devil stealing the stones and dropping them across the landscape, one of which struck a woman gathering herbs, embedding her into the earth as part of the circle. Another describes the monument as a giant's grave, each stone a marker for the bones of a colossal warrior. And then there are the Druids. Long associated with Stonehenge in popular imagination, the Druids were a priestly class among the Celtic peoples, living around 2,000 years ago, long after the last phase of Stonehenge had been completed. Early antiquarians, seeing the monument as both mysterious and spiritual, imagined the Druids gathering within the stones, performing rites, making sacrifices, or charting the stars. White-robed figures, standing in a solemn circle, staffs raised to the sky. The image is a powerful one, and it still lives on today, particularly in midsummer celebrations at the site. Yet archaeological evidence tells us that the Druids came too late to be the builders. They may have used the site, may have revered it, but they did not create it. Still, the connection has endured, perhaps because the Druids themselves remain mysterious, perhaps because, like the stones, they stand at the edge of fact and legend, where the borders blur and the story takes on its own quiet life. And that is the beauty of myths. They are not constrained by evidence. They drift, they evolve, they echo. In the 17th and 18th centuries, as antiquarians began studying Stonehenge in earnest, many still clung to mythic explanations. Some believed it was a Roman temple. Others thought it a monument to Nordic gods. Even as excavation revealed the human hand in its construction, the legends remained, layered over the facts like a soft mist over stone. Even today, in the age of satellites and scans, the stories persist. Some claim the site aligns with ley lines, invisible paths of energy that crisscross the earth. Others see alien intervention, ancient technology, lost civilizations. These theories are not supported by archaeology, yet they continue to captivate. Why? Because Stonehenge is not just a site to be measured, it is a feeling, an atmosphere, and where facts leave gaps, stories gently step in. Perhaps we are drawn to the myths not because they explain, but because they enchant, because they remind us that not everything need be solved to be sacred, that some mysteries are meant to be carried, not cracked, and that in the quiet spaces between knowledge, imagination blooms. As you stand before the stones and listen to the wind brushing through the grass, you may feel that same pull, the sense that something ancient still lingers here. Not just history, but memory. Not just memory, but magic. Whether it comes from Merlin or from the minds of the people who first gathered here, the magic is real, not in the lifting of stones, but in the lifting of hearts. And so we walk among these myths, not to find the truth, but to feel it, in the hush of the plain, in the curve of a shadow, in the warmth of the stone beneath the setting sun. We do not need to believe in giants or spells to feel the story stirring in the earth. Let the legends live. Let them move softly through the stones like mist at dawn. For even if the facts are buried deep in time, the wonder remains on the surface, waiting for those who pause long enough to dream. Stonehenge did not always stand in quiet reverence. There were centuries, long and drifting, when it lay forgotten, a ruin upon the plain, weathered, silent, and slowly succumbing to the rhythm of time. grass grew tall between its fallen stones. Moss softened its sharpest edges, and for a time the great circle was little more than a curiosity to the shepherds who passed it by, to the birds who perched upon its lintels, and to the wind which moved through it as freely as it did through the hills. But Stonehenge was never truly lost. It remained, patient, persistent, as the world changed around it. As the Romans marched through Britain, they passed the stones, leaving no written record, yet perhaps sparing a quiet glance. As Saxons tilled the nearby fields and monks built distant abbeys, the stones stood still. In the medieval period, they began to gather meaning once more, not from the builders, whose names were long forgotten, but from storytellers and scribes. It was in these centuries that myth and legend grew thickest, the age of Merlin and giants, of healing circles and dancing stones turned to stone. By the time the Renaissance arrived, curiosity about the ancient world stirred anew. Scholars and travellers began to document the site in earnest. In the 17th century, antiquarians like John Aubrey and William Stukeley made detailed sketches of the layout. Stukeley, fascinated by the Druids, was instrumental in linking Stonehenge to that mysterious priesthood, a connection that, while now known to be historically inaccurate, sparked a renewed reverence for the site. He walked the grounds with a measuring rod and a notebook, calling the place a patriarchal temple, interpreting it as a sacred space, aligned with the stars and shaped by ritual. Still, the stones were vulnerable. With no formal protection, Stonehenge was treated as both landmark and quarry. Stones were chipped away for building materials. Some were toppled. In the 1700s and 1800s, nearby roads were laid, and the quiet of the plain gave way to the rumble of wheels. Tourists began to arrive, at first a trickle, then a steady stream. They came by horse, by carriage, eventually by train, drawn not only by curiosity but by a growing sense of cultural heritage. And with their arrival came attention, both helpful and harmful. People carved their names into the stones. Picnics were held inside the circle. Horses trotted where rituals had once taken place. By the early 20th century, concern was growing that Stonehenge might not survive the modern world without intervention. In 1915, something shifted. The site, which had been privately owned, was placed into public care when local barrister Cecil Chubb bought it at auction, reportedly as a gift for his wife. But when she expressed less enthusiasm than he'd hoped, he donated it instead to the nation, under the condition that the public could access it freely. It was a turning point. Stonehenge had passed through the hands of myth, through the centuries of neglect, and now found itself under the watchful eye of preservation. From that moment, efforts to protect the monument gained momentum. Archaeologists began to study the site with fresh purpose. Fallen stones were re-erected and secured. Concrete bases were discreetly added to ensure the great trilithons would not tumble again. Surveys were carried out, photographs taken. For the first time, Stonehenge was not just admired. It was documented, studied, and defended. Throughout the 20th century, new discoveries continued to deepen our understanding. The surrounding landscape, once thought empty, was revealed to be filled with ancient earthworks, barrows, and processional routes. A hidden network of significance lay beneath the surface, invisible to the eye, but alive in the soil. Tools, bones, pottery, each find another whisper from the past, slowly reshaping our vision of what Stonehenge had once been. Preservation is a quiet kind of reverence. It means not just protecting the stones, but preserving the experience. In recent decades, access to the circle has been carefully managed. The days of casual climbing and carving have passed. A low rope now encircles the monument, not to exclude, but to honour, to maintain the sacred hush that lingers between the uprights. And yet, on the solstices, midsummer and midwinter, the ropes are lowered, and people are welcomed once more into the heart of the stones. Pagans, druids, tourists, wanderers, all standing shoulder to shoulder in the ancient light, drawn by something older than explanation. Today, Stonehenge is a United Nations educational, scientific and cultural organisation World Heritage Site. It is visited by over 1 million people a year. It has become an icon, a symbol of mystery, of endurance, of deep human time. Its image appears in textbooks and postcards, in television shows and songs. But beyond the fame, beyond the photographs, the stones themselves remain unchanged, silent, grounded, holding their place in the land and in the minds of all who see them. There is a delicate balance in preserving something so ancient. Too much intervention, and we risk losing the sense of timelessness. Too little, and we risk losing it altogether. And so the caretakers of Stonehenge walk gently. Archaeologists continue to study, using the latest technology, ground-penetrating radar, laser scanning, aerial photography, to reveal what lies beneath without disturbing what lies above. Each scan adds another layer to the story, each discovery another quiet note in the song of the stones. And yet, for all we've learned, the heart of Stonehenge remains mysterious. Perhaps that is what draws us back, the sense that no amount of preservation or study will ever strip away its deeper magic. That beyond the visitor centre, beyond the signs and ropes, there is still something ancient in the air, something that refuses to be catalogued. So now, as we stand again at the edge of the circle, let us give thanks for those who kept it safe, for the watchers and the wanderers, the scribes and the scientists, the dreamers who saw not just a pile of stone, but a story worth saving. Let us honour the silence, the stillness, the patient endurance of this sacred ground, and let us carry forward what Stonehenge teaches best, that some things are worth protecting, not because we fully understand them, but because they help us understand ourselves. Some places never quite leave you, even after you've walked away, even when the wind is behind you and the stones are fading in the distance, something lingers, a quiet question, a weightless wonder. Stonehenge is one of those places. Its mystery does not clamour for attention. It settles into your thoughts softly, like a whisper you almost heard. It does not ask to be solved. It asks to be felt. What is it about this circle that continues to draw us in, thousands of years after its builders are gone? Why do we return, not only with our footsteps, but with our questions, our stories, our dreams? Perhaps it is because Stonehenge holds space for the unknown. In a world increasingly obsessed with certainty, it reminds us that wonder still has a place. Despite all we've learned, from carbon dating to satellite imaging, we still cannot say with full confidence why it was built. We can trace the stones, the soil, the tools. We can map alignments and identify bones, but we cannot touch the heart of its meaning, not fully. And so the monument continues to breathe. It breathes with memory, not just of one moment, but of many. For Stonehenge was not built all at once. It evolved, layer by layer, over centuries. It began as post holes in the ground, perhaps for totems or markers. Then came earthworks, then timber, then stone. Each generation added something, not only with their hands, but with their intentions. And then, at some unknown moment, they stopped. The building ceased, but the meaning remained. That, too, is a mystery. Why did they stop? Did the people who once gathered here move on? Did their beliefs shift? Was the monument ever completed, or did it simply become complete with time? The silence of Stonehenge does not feel empty. It feels full, as though it still holds the breath of those who stood within it, the pulse of rituals long faded. It holds our longing, too, our desire to reach backward, to touch the hands that once shaped stone with nothing but rope, bone, and belief. And perhaps that's what makes it so deeply human. Not the stones themselves, but what they represent. Our need to leave something behind, to make meaning, to stand in the vastness of time and carve out a space that says, we were here, we looked to the sky, we felt the mystery too. Stonehenge is not the only ancient monument in the world. There are pyramids and ziggurats, temples and tombs. Yet there is something distinct about this circle on the English plain. Something stripped of grandeur, yet saturated with gravity. It does not boast, it waits. And in that waiting, we are invited to listen. Listen to the wind moving through the grasses. Listen to the soft beat of your own heart. Listen to the hush between questions. What do you hear? Some say Stonehenge was a place of healing. Others believe it was a burial site, a temple, a calendar, a symbol of unity. Perhaps it was all of these things. Perhaps it was something more. The beauty lies in the not knowing, in the invitation to wonder without the burden of proof. In this way, Stonehenge is not frozen in the past. It lives in the present. Every time someone stands in its shadow, the circle is completed again. Not with stone, but with presence. The act of being there, of pausing and feeling, becomes a ritual of its own. It becomes a joining of generations, past to present, present to future. And the circle turns. It turns as the sun rises and sets in the same ancient rhythm. It turns as people gather each solstice, forming new memories within old stones. It turns in the quiet click of cameras, in the quiet pause of breath, in the moments when a child asks, "Who built this?" and no one knows quite what to say. It turns when we admit that we do not have all the answers, and feel strangely comforted by that truth, because mystery, in its gentlest form, is a kind of peace. It gives us space to imagine, to revere, to feel small in the best possible way, to realize we are part of a much greater story, one that stretches backward into shadow and forward into starlight. Stonehenge is not a chapter, it is a circle, and it does not end. So now, as we prepare to leave this sacred place, let us carry something with us. Not just the facts or the theories, but the feeling. That stillness, that hush, that quiet knowing that even without full understanding, something important happened here. Something beautiful. Something human. Let us honor the builders whose names we will never know, whose hands shaped these stones, whose feet walk the same soil we do now. Let us honor the generations who kept watch, through storms and seasons, through ruin and restoration. And let us honor the mystery itself, not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a gift to be held with care. As we look once more at the great circle, outlined against the fading light, we do not say goodbye. We simply turn, gently, and walk onward. The stones remain, the stars turn overhead, and the story continues. Thank you for joining me on this quiet journey through time, myth, and memory. Together, we've wandered across windswept plains, stood among ancient stones, and listened to the soft echoes of a world long past, and yet still quietly alive in the present. Stonehenge does not offer every answer, but perhaps that is its quietest wisdom. In its mystery, it invites us not to solve, but simply to feel, to remember that we too are part of something ancient and enduring. If you're still awake, you can now allow the soothing sounds to drift you gently off to sleep. Let your thoughts fade like mist across the plain, and let rest find you softly and slowly. Or if you're still full of quiet curiosity, why not journey onward with one of our other videos? There are many more stories waiting. Stories of forgotten empires, timeless wonders, and calm, star-filled skies. Before you go, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Drift Off to History, so you never miss a new journey. Wherever you are, and whatever time it is, thank you for being here. You are part of the circle now, and the story continues. Good night.